LeSueur County, Minnesota, January 1885. František Dvořák stood in his three-room farmhouse kitchen, splitting oak into his cast-iron firebox, while frost whitened the windows at 10 degrees below zero. But this wasn't just any stove. Dvořák had built 6 feet of brick and tile mass directly into the corner where kitchen, parlor, and bedroom walls met, creating 3 separate heating faces from a single fire. His neighbors called it wasteful. "Pick a room," they laughed. "Heat won't cross 2 walls." Abel Whitcomb dismissed it as confused old-world nonsense, insisting you needed 1 stove per room like any sensible American farmer. Then the blizzard of January 12th, 1888 hit. Temperatures plunged from 20 above to 10 below in hours, with winds screaming at 50 miles per hour. While neighbors desperately fed 6 separate stoves around the clock and still couldn't keep their rooms above 50 degrees, Dvořák's single morning fire held all 3 rooms steady at 70 degrees, 60 degrees warmer than outside, using 1/3 the wood. What did this Czech mason understand about thermal mass and heat distribution that made frontier settlers abandon everything they thought they knew about staying warm? The first test came on November 23, 1885, when the mercury dropped to 15 degrees before dawn, and north winds stripped heat from every surface they touched. František Dvořák rose at 5:30, opened the bypass damper to establish draft, and loaded 28 pounds of split oak into his firebox. The secondary air slot drew cold air across the hot coals, creating the complete combustion his master had taught him. No smoke, no waste, just clean flame that pushed exhaust gases through the 3 serpentine channels he had built into his masonry mass. Within 45 minutes, the tile faces in all 3 rooms began warming to the touch. By 8 o'clock, when Dvořák closed the bypass and set the storage run dampers, temperatures throughout his house had stabilized at 72 degrees in the kitchen, 71 in the parlor, 70 degrees in the bedroom. The ceramic surfaces radiated gentle, consistent heat that warmed objects and people directly, not just the air that would escape through every crack and gap in the building envelope. Across the lane, Abel Whitcomb was already on his second firing of the day. His kitchen stove glowed cherry red, pushing the immediate area to nearly 80 degrees while corners of the room remained cold enough to see breath. The parlor stove received its own load of wood, the bedroom stove another. By mid-morning, Whitcomb had burned through 60 pounds of oak and still couldn't achieve even heating throughout his house. The thin sheet iron radiated fierce heat when fed, then cooled rapidly as the fire died, creating cycles of sweltering and shivering that defined frontier winter life. Luisa Benda, maintaining her careful temperature logs, recorded the dramatic difference in thermal performance. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 hours after Dvořák's single firing, her thermometer read 72 degrees in his kitchen, 71 in his parlor, 70 in his bedroom. The Whitcomb house, despite 3 active stoves burning intermittently all day, showed 54 degrees in the kitchen with the fire banked, 48 degrees in the parlor, 45 degrees in the bedroom where the iron stove had been allowed to die down. The Czech immigrant's confused heating system was maintaining consistent comfort while his neighbor's conventional approach created a patchwork of hotspots and cold zones. The physics behind Dvořák's success lay in thermal mass principles that American settlers had never encountered. The 3 tons of brick and ceramic in his corner heater absorbed intense heat during the morning's combustion phase, then released that energy slowly over 12 to 18 hours. Surface temperatures on the tile faces peaked at 110 degrees Fahrenheit during firing, then gradually cooled to 95 degrees by evening, still warm enough to heat the surrounding air and radiate comfort to anyone within 6 feet of the ceramic panels. More importantly, the long gas path through each flue channel extracted maximum energy from every piece of wood. Hot exhaust that would normally rush straight up a chimney was instead forced through 60 linear feet of brick passages, giving up its heat to the masonry mass before reaching the outdoor stack at temperatures below 300 degrees. Whitcomb's iron stoves, by contrast, sent precious BTUs straight up their flues at temperatures exceeding 600 degrees, energy that could have warmed his house instead, heating the December sky. December brought sustained cold that revealed the true advantage of thermal mass heating. When overnight temperatures reached 5 below zero with 20-mile-per-hour winds, Dvořák maintained his single firing routine: one load of oak at 6 in the morning, bypass open for complete combustion, storage run engaged by 7:30. His house held steady at 68 to 70 degrees until evening, when he might add a 15-pound top-up charge if conditions seemed especially severe. Total daily wood consumption: 40 to 50 pounds. The Whitcomb household, meanwhile, had shifted to round-the-clock firing. Abel rose twice each night to feed the bedroom stove. His wife tended the kitchen fire every 3 hours. Their teenage son managed the parlor heating. Even with this constant attention, room temperatures fluctuated wildly, scorching near the stoves when freshly loaded, dropping to the 40s within hours as the thin iron cooled. Their daily wood consumption had reached 180 pounds, nearly 4 times Dvořák's usage, yet they could not achieve the consistent comfort he maintained with minimal effort. Charles Peterson, whose farm lay a quarter-mile south, began stopping by both houses during his evening chores, curious about the thermal performance difference everyone was discussing. In Dvořák's parlor, Peterson found himself removing his heavy coat within minutes, comfortable enough to sit and discuss crop prices while the ceramic face radiated gentle warmth. At the Whitcombs, he kept his outer layers on, huddling near whichever stove had been most recently fed, while drafts from cold corners made his back and neck ache. The fuel mathematics told an undeniable story. Dvořák's woodpile, carefully measured in October, was diminishing at a rate suggesting 4 cords would last the entire winter. The Whitcombs, burning nearly 4 times as much daily, faced the prospect of 12 to 14 cords, assuming they could cut, split, and haul that much timber while maintaining their other farm operations. The economic implications were staggering. At $3 per delivered cord, Dvořák would spend $12 heating his house while his neighbors invested $42 for inferior comfort. By January 1886, the mockery had quieted considerably. When temperatures hit 10 below zero and stayed there for a week, visitors to the Dvořák house found all 3 rooms pleasantly warm, the air humid enough from a kettle on the cookplate to prevent the dry, harsh breathing that plagued other households. The ceramic faces maintained their steady radiation, surfaces comfortable to touch, never scalding hot like iron stove sides that could burn unwary children. František's wife moved freely between rooms without the shawls and heavy indoor clothing that frontier women typically wore during winter months. The corner heater had proven its worth through the season's first major test, demonstrating that proper thermal mass design could achieve superior comfort while consuming dramatically less fuel than conventional heating methods. The winter of 1886 to 1887 arrived with a vengeance that tested every heating system in Le Sueur County. By December 15th, nighttime temperatures had plunged to 20 below zero, with daytime highs struggling to reach 5 above. Sustained winds of 20 to 30 miles per hour created wind chills that could freeze exposed skin in minutes, and more critically for homesteaders, stripped heat from exterior walls faster than most heating systems could replace it. František Dvořák adjusted his firing routine to match the severe conditions, switching from his usual oak splits to dense ironwood and adding more mass per charge. His morning load increased to 35 pounds, evening top-ups to 25 pounds when the mercury dropped below 15. Even with this heavier firing schedule, his total daily wood consumption remained under 60 pounds, while maintaining interior temperatures that astonished his neighbors. The thermal mass principles that had seemed excessive during construction now revealed their true purpose. The thousands of pounds of brick and ceramic provided enough heat storage to ride out the most brutal conditions Minnesota could deliver. The ceramic tile faces, engineered to handle thermal cycling, performed flawlessly under stress. Surface temperatures during the morning burn reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit, then settled into their slow release pattern that kept all 3 rooms between 68 and 71 degrees until the next firing. Most remarkably, the rooms lost only 2 to 3 degrees overnight, even when outdoor temperatures hit 25 below, thermal inertia that eliminated the dangerous temperature swings plaguing conventional heating systems. Abel Whitcomb's household was failing under the winter's assault. His kitchen stove, fed constantly to combat heat loss through the exterior wall it backed against, had warped its thin iron firebox from thermal stress. The parlor stove's flue connection had cracked at the wall thimble, allowing smoke and cold air to seep into the room. Most seriously, frost lines had appeared along the baseboards, where inadequate heating met frigid walls, creating conditions for condensation, ice formation, and the beginning stages of structural damage that could compromise the entire building. The Whitcomb children developed persistent night coughs from sleeping in rooms that fluctuated between scorching heat near the stoves and near-freezing temperatures in the corners. Mrs. Whitcomb moved 2 cots into the kitchen, abandoning the bedroom and parlor entirely during the coldest weeks. 3 rooms had effectively become one barely habitable space, negating the investment they had made in a multi-room house and multiple heating systems. Charles Peterson's farm told a similar story of heating system breakdown under extreme conditions. His bedroom stove had developed a crack in the firebox that allowed dangerous gases to leak into the sleeping area, forcing his family to close off that room entirely. The parlor stove consumed wood so rapidly that Peterson spent 4 hours daily just splitting and hauling fuel, time desperately needed for animal care and other winter chores. His wood pile, calculated to last through March, was disappearing at a rate that would exhaust his supply by February. The fuel mathematics had become a crisis for conventional heating households. While Dvořák's consumption had increased to approximately 1.5 cords per month during the severe weather, his neighbors were burning 3 to 4 times that amount with inferior results. Peterson faced the prospect of purchasing additional wood at winter prices, $5 to $6 per cord delivered, or allowing his family to freeze in rooms he could no longer afford to heat. Luisa Benda's temperature logs documented the stark performance differences. On January 21, 1887, with outdoor temperatures at 18 below zero and winds gusting to 35 miles per hour, she recorded 70 degrees in Dvořák's bedroom at 5:30 in the morning, more than 12 hours after his evening firing. The Whitcomb bedroom, abandoned for the night, registered 28 degrees. Peterson's parlor, with a fire banked at midnight, had dropped to 34 degrees by dawn. The Czech immigrant's thermal mass system was maintaining livable temperatures while his neighbors' iron stoves created zones of barely survivable cold. The humidity control provided by Dvořák's system became increasingly important as winter deepened. The large ceramic mass allowed him to keep a kettle simmering on the cook plate without overheating the kitchen, maintaining indoor humidity between 30 and 35%. This prevented the respiratory distress, nosebleeds, and cracked skin that plagued households where iron stoves baked all moisture from the air. The comfortable humidity also reduced static electricity and made the moderate temperatures feel warmer than they measured on the thermometer. Safety differences became apparent as neighbors struggled with overheated, overfired stoves. The Johnsons, 2 farms east, had experienced a chimney fire when creosote buildup in their frequently used flue ignited during a particularly desperate feeding session. Peterson's cracked firebox created carbon monoxide risks that forced his family to sleep with windows partially open even in sub-zero weather. The Whitcombs' warped stove threatened to fail entirely, potentially leaving them without heat during the season's worst conditions. Dvořák's system, burning hot and clean with its preheated secondary air, produced minimal creosote and maintained steady, safe temperatures throughout. The ceramic faces never became hot enough to ignite clothing or burn curious children, while the complete combustion in his properly sized firebox eliminated the dangerous gases that poorly functioning iron stoves often produced. His single chimney, carrying exhaust from complete burns rather than the smoky, incomplete combustion of overfired iron stoves, required cleaning only once per season compared to the monthly maintenance his neighbors' multiple flues demanded. By February 1887, the contrast in heating performance had become impossible to ignore. Dvořák's house remained a warm, humid refuge, where visitors removed their coats and stayed for evening conversations. His neighbors' homes had become survival shelters where families huddled around individual stoves, abandoning whole sections of their houses to conserve fuel and maintain barely adequate temperatures in single rooms. The excessive thermal mass that had drawn ridicule during construction was now the only heating system in the township, performing as designed under extreme conditions. The morning of January 12, 1888 began deceptively mild at 20 degrees above zero, with František Dvořák following his standard winter routine of loading 30 pounds of ironwood into his firebox at 6:30. Light snow had been falling since midnight, accumulating to perhaps 3 inches across the Minnesota prairie. By 9 o'clock, as his ceramic faces reached their normal operating temperature and began their steady heat release, the barometric pressure was dropping with ominous speed. Weather-wise farmers recognized the signs. A violent front was approaching from the northwest, bringing conditions that would separate functional heating systems from inadequate ones. At 11:15, the temperature began its catastrophic plunge. Within 2 hours, the mercury had crashed from 20 above to 10 below zero, a 30-degree drop that caught every household in the township, unprepared. Winds that had whispered through bare oak branches suddenly roared across the open country at 40 to 50 miles per hour, driving snow horizontally and reducing visibility to zero. The blizzard had arrived with the sudden fury that made Minnesota winters legendary for killing the unprepared. Dvořák responded to the crisis with practiced efficiency learned from Bohemian winters. He latched the exterior shutters on all windows, eliminating convective heat loss through the glass surfaces. In each doorway between rooms, he hung heavy wool curtains that allowed radiant heat from the ceramic faces to reach occupied spaces while blocking air movement that would carry precious warmth away. These simple modifications transformed his house into a thermal fortress, with the massive corner heater at its core radiating comfort in all directions. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors as the storm's violence made travel impossible. Charles Peterson arrived first, having been caught between farms when the whiteout conditions struck. His youngest child, struggling with the respiratory ailments that plagued inadequately heated homes, needed warmth and shelter that his own house could no longer provide. Abel Whitcomb appeared an hour later with his wife, abandoning their failing heating system as the warped kitchen stove finally cracked beyond repair and their other rooms became uninhabitable. By 4 o'clock, 9 people had taken refuge in Dvořák's 3-room house, a test no heating system in the township had ever faced. The Czech immigrant's corner heater met the challenge without strain. Each ceramic face continued its steady radiation, maintaining 68 to 70 degrees in every room despite the human load and the storm's assault on the building envelope. The thermal mass that neighbors had mocked as excessive now revealed its true purpose, providing enough stored heat to maintain comfort for multiple families during extreme conditions. The contrast with conventional heating systems became stark as the evening progressed. Word filtered through the storm that the Johnson farmhouse, dependent on 3 iron stoves, had been abandoned entirely when the family could no longer keep any room above 40 degrees. Their fuel consumption had reached desperate levels, over 200 pounds of wood per day, yet the thin iron stoves could not overcome the heat loss through exterior walls when 50-mile-per-hour winds stripped away every BTU as fast as it was generated. The family had sought shelter with relatives in town rather than risk freezing in their own home. Dvořák's fuel consumption for the entire crisis day totaled 55 pounds of wood, his normal morning charge plus a 25-pound evening supplement to account for the extra occupancy and severe conditions. The Peterson and Whitcomb households, attempting to heat their own homes before seeking refuge, had burned through an estimated 220 pounds of wood combined while failing to maintain livable temperatures in more than one room each. The efficiency advantage of thermal mass heating had become a matter of survival rather than mere comfort. The physics of radiant heating proved crucial as wind speeds peaked during the night. Even when room air temperatures dropped slightly due to infiltration, the mean radiant temperature from the ceramic surfaces kept all 9 occupants comfortable without the superheated air that iron stoves required. A person sitting 6 feet from Dvořák's parlor tile face felt as warm as someone crowding directly against a red-hot iron stove, but without the scorching heat that made conventional stoves dangerous in close quarters. Morning brought the storm's gradual weakening and a sobering assessment of heating system performance across the township. The Dvořák house had sheltered 9 people through the blizzard while maintaining consistent temperatures and consuming less fuel than any single neighboring household had burned attempting to heat just their own families. The ceramic faces showed no thermal stress despite the extended high-load operation, their glazed surfaces as smooth and crack-free as the day they were installed. Abel Whitcomb, warming his hands against the parlor tile face as dawn broke, finally grasped the engineering principles he had ridiculed. The massive thermal storage eliminated the boom and bust cycles that made iron stoves ineffective during extreme conditions. The interior placement meant every BTU generated stayed within the living space instead of heating exterior walls that surrendered their warmth to winter winds. The long flue passages extracted maximum energy from each piece of wood, while the preheated combustion air ensured complete burns that produced heat rather than smoke. Charles Peterson, whose own heating bills had reached crisis levels, began asking specific questions about construction costs and installation requirements. His pencil calculations on the back of an envelope showed that even at $200 total cost, the corner heater would pay for itself in fuel savings within 3 winters. More importantly, it would provide the consistent, safe heat that his family needed to remain healthy through Minnesota's harsh seasons. The January 12th blizzard had delivered the ultimate test of heating system design, revealing which approaches could maintain human comfort under extreme conditions, and which would fail when lives depended on their performance. František Dvořák's thermal mass system had not merely survived the storm, it had provided refuge for multiple families while consuming less fuel than any conventional system in the township. The day the laughing stopped had arrived with 50-mile-per-hour winds and a 30-degree temperature drop that separated proven technology from frontier mythology. Within a week of the January blizzard, Charles Peterson knocked on František Dvořák's door with a leather portfolio containing detailed drawings of his own 3-room farmhouse and a request that would change heating practices across southern Minnesota. Peterson had calculated his winter fuel costs at $48 for the season, money that could have purchased 2 dairy cows or 40 bushels of seed wheat, while Dvořák had spent $14 heating a house that remained more comfortable than Peterson's throughout the coldest months on record. The Czech immigrant's thermal mass system represented not just superior comfort, but economic survival for frontier families, stretching every dollar through harsh seasons. By March 1888, Abel Whitcomb had commissioned Jan Novak and Antonín Svoboda, 2 Czech masons from New Prague, to build a corner heater in his own farmhouse. The project required modifying his existing room layout to accommodate the 6-foot by 6-foot L-shaped foundation, but Whitcomb had witnessed the performance difference firsthand during the blizzard shelter. The masons quoted $170 for materials and labor, including 3 glazed tile faces shipped from Milwaukee and a cookplate cast in St. Paul foundries. Despite the substantial upfront cost, Whitcomb's fuel savings would recover the investment within 2 winters. Word of the corner heater's performance spread through Czech parishes first, carried by families who had relatives sheltering at the Dvořák house during the storm. Father Václav Žiha mentioned the heating innovation during Sunday services, noting how practical knowledge from the old country could solve New World problems. By autumn 1888, 6 corner heaters were under construction in the township, with mason teams working through harvest season to complete installations before winter temperatures returned. The standardization process began as demand expanded beyond the Czech community. Novak and Svoboda developed consistent specifications that could adapt to different house layouts while maintaining thermal performance. Fireboxes remained 12 inches by 12 inches by 16 inches deep for optimal combustion, but they adjusted the overall mass from 5 feet 6 inches square for smaller homes up to 7 feet square for larger families. The 3 ceramic faces became standard: kitchen with cookplate, parlor, and bedroom with glazed tiles, while clean outdoors and damper configurations remained identical across all installations. Pricing stabilized around the regional average as material sources became established. A complete corner heater system cost $150 to $220 depending on tile freight costs and foundation requirements, compared to $80 to $100 for 3 separate iron stoves. However, the operational economics strongly favored thermal mass heating. Corner heater households reported fuel consumption of 3 to 5 cords per winter, while conventional heating required 10 to 14 cords for comparable comfort levels. At $3 per cord delivered, the annual savings ranged from $21 to $33, substantial money for farm families operating on cash incomes of $200 to $400 yearly. Documentation of performance advantages became systematic as Louisa Benda expanded her temperature logging project. The schoolteacher recruited families with both heating systems to maintain daily records throughout the winter of 1888 to 1889. Her compiled data showed corner heaters maintaining average interior temperatures of 67 to 72 degrees with 1 to 2 firings per day, while iron stove households achieved 50 to 55 degrees with 9 to 12 daily firings. Fuel efficiency measurements confirmed corner heater users consumed 60 to 70% less wood for superior comfort. The safety advantages became equally important as adoption spread. Corner heater households reported no chimney fires, no carbon monoxide incidents, and no burns from overheated surfaces. The ceramic faces reached maximum temperatures of 120 degrees, warm enough to dry mittens but safe for children to touch. Complete combustion with preheated secondary air eliminated the dangerous gases and creosote buildup that plagued overworked iron stoves during extreme weather. Annual maintenance consisted of cleaning ash from 3 clean-out doors and a single chimney sweep compared to monthly flue maintenance required by conventional systems. Cultural transmission played a crucial role in spreading the technology. Swedish and Norwegian families initially resisted the Czech stove, but performance during the severe winter of 1889 to 1890 convinced even skeptical Scandinavian settlers. Erik Larsson, whose family had emigrated from Bergen, commissioned a corner heater after his iron stoves failed completely during a February cold snap that reached 30 below zero. The Larsson installation became the first non-Czech corner heater in the region, opening adoption beyond ethnic lines. Regional expansion accelerated through practical demonstration rather than theoretical promotion. Farmers visiting neighboring counties for livestock sales or grain marketing encountered corner heaters in Czech settlements around New Prague, Montgomery, and Lonsdale. The consistent story, dramatic fuel savings, superior comfort, safer operation, convinced increasing numbers to invest in thermal mass heating despite the higher initial costs. By 1890, corner heaters were operating in Scott, Rice, and Dakota counties following Czech settlement patterns but increasingly serving mixed ethnic communities. The technology's persistence reflected its fundamental soundness rather than fashion or novelty. Corner heaters built in 1888 continued operating effectively decades later, their ceramic faces uncracked, their thermal performance unchanged. Children who grew up with thermal mass heating requested similar systems in their own homes, creating generational adoption that entrenched the technology in regional building practices. Mason teams in southern Minnesota remained busy with corner heater installations well into the 1890s, as the technique spread through practical demonstration and word-of-mouth recommendation. The economic impact extended beyond individual households to influence regional fuel markets and forest management. Communities with high corner heater adoption required significantly less firewood per capita, reducing pressure on local timber resources and lowering delivered wood prices for all residents. The efficiency gains represented not just personal savings, but community-wide conservation of the forest resources that sustained frontier settlements through Minnesota's demanding winters. František Dvořák's adaptation of Bohemian thermal mass principles to Minnesota frontier conditions had evolved from a single experimental installation into a regional heating standard that would influence building practices for generations.